review of the lymphatic system. Our smallest lymphatic vessels are lymphatic capillaries that drain into collecting vessels that become afferent collecting vessels that drain past lymph nodes, that drain into efferent collecting vessels that will become the afferent collecting vessel for the next lymph node. All of our lymphatic collecting vessels are going to drain into lymphatic trunks. The lymphatic trunks are going to drain into one of two lymphatic ducts, the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct. The right lymphatic duct drains the trunks from the right side of your head and neck, your right arm, the right side of your thorax. The thoracic duct drains everything else. The right lymphatic duct drains into your right subclavian vein. The thoracic duct drains into your left subclavian vein. That's how we return all of that extra interstitial fluid that didn't get picked back up on the venous side of capillary exchange to the blood. Okay, so how can we bring lots of stuff together right now? Well, in the immune system, we said, or for the immune chapter, we talked about innate immunity, our barriers to entrance, our skin and our mucous membranes are the first things. And then we talked about cells, like our neutrophils and macrophages. So we'll look at those in a minute. And then we talked about generalized responses, like an inflammatory response, so that we'll talk about in a minute. And then we talked about specific immunity. How do we get our T cells and our B cells activated? So, all right, let's think about this. That's all I really want to say about the lymphatic system is a review of the structures. So let's just imagine that we step on attack. And what's going to happen here then is I'm going to start an inflammatory response. So if we think about inflammatory responses, the first things that happen are that we have inflammatory chemical release. That's going to lead to the vascular changes and the chemotaxis. We're going to get our leukocytes to the site of injury because of all of these things that happen when we release these inflammatory chemicals. So inflammatory chemical release happens first, then we get vascular changes. Then we get our, what word am I looking for? Leukocyte mobilization. Gosh darn it. Okay, so our inflammatory chemical release, we're going to have vasodilators released so that we can get these vascular changes. We become super leaky and super permeable. Our endothelium starts expressing CAM, cell adhesion molecules, so our white blood cells can slow down. Other chemicals are going to be released. Chemotactic factors that are going to attract white blood cells from the area, white blood cells from the blood to the area. The first ones that are going to show up are going to be neutrophils. They're phagocytic for bacteria. The next ones that will show up will be macrophages. They're phagocytic for anything, and they're going to become antigen-presenting cells. So let's imagine that we step on attack in our right foot, and it's introducing now purple bacteria. So our inflammatory response is going to happen, and now we're going to get a lot of blood flow to the area, and exudate is going to form, right? Because what happens is all of this happens, these vascular changes are going to cause these capillaries to be super leaky. So if we're super leaky, we're going to push out more fluid. We're still only going to pick up 85% in the venous circulation. So the extra 15% is a lot more than normal, and now it's going to wash that wound and become exudate. So all of the bacteria that got introduced are going to wash into that wound. Here in blue is my lymphatic vessel system. So just imagine down here in the wound, what I have happening is these leaky capillaries, so I got a lot more blood flow and exudate is washing into this wound. Well, my bacteria is down here replicating like faster than bunnies. It's replicating by fission. So one is going to split into two, and now each of those is going to split into two more, and it happens really fast. So they're replicating like crazy. So neutrophils are going to come in here and they're going to eat them up, and they're going to undergo respiratory burst and form pus. So neutrophils undergoing respiratory burst are the main components of pus. That's going to happen right here in the wound. Macrophages are going to eat up this bacteria as well. That's going to happen right in the wound. These things are going to wash now into the exudate and wash then into these lymphatic capillaries. And now I have this macrophage who gobbled up this bacteria. And he can come here and come to this lymph node. So here's my macrophage, and he's an antigen-presenting cell for purple bacteria. And he has got purple bacteria stuffed in his MHC1 and its MHC2. So he's going to wait to present this now to a lymphocyte. Okay, so that's the inflammatory response. Well, lymphocytes, what the heck are they doing? They originate in red bone marrow. B cells mature there. T cells go to the thymus and mature, and then they leave, mature but naive but immunocompetent. They go out and hang out in secondary lymphatic structures and seed and await antigen encounter. Well, now we've encountered purple bacteria. This antigen-presenting cell is going to present purple bacteria to a T helper cell using its MHC class II molecule. So the T helper cell is going to recognize this, presented in MHC class II. It's going to release interleukins that are going to bind in an autocrine fashion. That'll give me my second stimulation step. This T helper cell is now activated to form a clone of what? Effector cells and memory cells. So I'm going to form a clone, and then I'm going to differentiate. My effectors are going to do the effector response of a T helper cell, which is sit in here and pump out interleukins. So here in the lymph node, interleukin level is going to go up. So they're pumping out interleukins. And then I've got memory cells that are going to hang out here and wait until next time I meet purple bacteria. Okay, well the other thing that's happening is bacteria are replicating by fission, so they're washing into the lymph. And these bacteria now are coming into this lymph node. So here are a bunch of purple bacteria now in this lymph node. So they're going to bind to B cell receptors, causing those B cells to cross-link their receptors and induce receptor-mediated endocytosis. So now the B cell becomes an antigen-presenting cell and is going to stuff that purple bacteria up into its MHC class II. And so if this is all that happens, this is all that's going to happen. And you might say, well, interleukins are going up. Yeah, but so what? We need a second co-stimulatory effect from a T helper cell. If all we do is have this B cell activated and does its receptor-mediated endocytosis, then it's just going to sit there and it's going to wait. Because we don't want to start an immune response unless we're really sick. We know we're really sick when we get this guy activated and we get this guy activated. So this guy's already activated, so he's going to be wandering through the lymph node, feeling up all the cells, what's going on. He comes across this B cell and he says, oh, here's purple bacteria in your MHC2. Guess what? I'm activated to purple bacteria. So now this T helper cell is going to bind and release interleukins that will give my B cell its second stimulation step. So now it can form a clone of what? Effectors and memory cells. But now our effectors are not B cells. And this was a problem that caused, or this was a question that caused some people problems on the quiz. The B cell does not release antibodies. Plasma cells do. So when I form a clone, I'm going to differentiate into effector cells that are plasma cells and to memory cells that will hang out and wait next encounter with purple bacteria. The effector cells are plasma cells that are going to be pumping out antibodies. So what's this antibody going to do? It's going to bind every purple bacteria epitope that I see in the body and block it, either neutralize it or agglutinate it, or mark it for opsonization, or mark it for complement fixation, or something like that. Okay, well what about a T cell response? We're all fighting the coronavirus! So let's just imagine that your partner goes to LA and gets coronavirus and sneezes on your face. And so now coronavirus is coming into your nasal cavity, and so there are a couple things that we can hit right here. Well, a couple things are going to happen. It's going to start infecting my cells. So my cells are going to start getting sick, and they're going to start presenting coronavirus in their MHC class I molecules. And then I am going to go to a tonsil or to a lymph node and I've got macrophages hanging out as well. So my macrophages are going to see these sick cells, they're going to gobble them up, they're going to see the virus, they're going to gobble it up and present it. So my macrophages are going to become antigen-presenting cells for, I'm just going to stop calling it coronavirus. We'll call it orange virus. And they're going to present orange virus in MHC class I and in MHC class II. So let's just imagine it came in through our nose. So the secondary lymphatic structures that are going to be easy to get to activate an immune response are going to be our tonsils. We've got a pharyngeal tonsil, palatine tonsils, and lingual tonsils. or they're in the cervical lymph nodes. So this is what's cool about lymph nodes. They're at these prescribed intervals where if you introduce a pathogen to the body, we can hopefully stimulate an immune response a couple ways before we get back to the blood. If you cut your hand, we've got our brachial and axillary lymph nodes that can do all of this. If you cut your foot, we've got popliteal and inguinal lymph nodes that can do this. If something comes into your head, we've got your tonsils and your cervical lymph nodes that do this. If something comes into your chest, we've got there are a bunch of thoracic, or a bunch of lymph nodes throughout your thoracic cavity. So, I mean, here's the other thing too, bringing it into respiratory system. Imagine that you breathe this virus in, and it doesn't get trapped in your mucosal membrane. You could breathe it all the way down into your bronchial tree, and when you get to the alveoli, there are macrophages there who can become antigen-presenting cells for this virus. And their job then is to get to a secondary lymphatic structure and present this antigen. So T helper cells help both branches of the immune system. But let's just imagine that the first thing that this antigen-presenting cell encounters is a cytotoxic T cell. So this antigen-presenting cell, let's say, gets to your pharyngeal tonsil and meets up with a cytotoxic T cell. A naive but immunocompetent cytotoxic T cell. It's going to recognize antigen presented in MHC class 1 using its CD8 protein. So it's going to bind to that. This is the first activation step for my cytotoxic T cell. But that's all that's happened. So that's all that will happen. If nothing else happens, these two cells are locked in a death kiss. And they're going to be gobbled up by some other macrophage. Why? Because as soon as I activate this cell, I am going to start killing my own cells. I do not want to start killing my own cells unless I know that I'm sick. Did I totally? Okay. All right, so these two, they're just going to be locked up there. All right, well then how the hell am I going to get an immune response going? Well, because I've got other cells that are sick, I've got lots of virus coming in here, so we just have to wait for what? For a helper T cell to meet another antigen-presenting cell. So another macrophage has to meet this orange virus and present. It's going to put it both in MHC1 and MHC2. But what we need to do now is activate our helper T cell, so it's going to recognize orange virus presented in MHC2 using its CD4 protein. That's the first activation step. It's going to release interleukins that bind in an autocrine fashion. That's the second activation step. And now I'm activated to form a clone of effectors and memory cells. And my effectors are going to carry out my effector response, which is to pump out interleukins. So interleukins now are going to go up high. Oh, yay! They're going to bind to my cytotoxic T cell. Boom, boom. That's my second activation step. And what am I activated to do? Form a clone of effector cells and memory cells. And now this time my memory cells are going to do what they always do, hang out and await encounter in the future. This time my effector cells are going to go out and kill all of my infected cells. That is why it is so important to make sure I'm really sick. So now my effector cells are going to go out and they're going to induce apoptosis into all of my self cells presenting orange virus. All right, that's probably the most confusing parts of chapter 20 and 21. Chapter 22, respiratory system, you breathe air. Why? Aha, your diaphragm contracts, it pushes down on your abdominal organs and out on your thorax, increasing the volume of your thorax, decreasing intrapulmonary pressure so that atmospheric pressure, air is greater than intrapulmonary pressure, air flows in your nasal cavity, where it's humidified and warmed as it goes, it's conditioned as it goes past the nasal concha. It's and moistened. And we're going to whack all of our debris into it, which is going to be part of this innate immune response, or innate immunity. We'll whack all the debris into it and trap that there. But then the air is going to flow past to the nasopharynx, to the oropharynx, to the laryngopharynx, into the larynx, into the trachea, into the right and left main bronchi, into our lobar bronchi, into our segmental bronchi. Those are going to get smaller and smaller. As we're going down the bronchial tree, we're going, our epithelium is starting as pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium in the nasopharynx, and in the oro and laryngopharynx is stratified squamous epithelium because of the food thing. But then when we get to the larynx, and our bronchial tree, well, when we get to the larynx, we're going to go back to our pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. We're going to get to our trachea, it's going to be the same. And our trachea, we'll see we have these tracheal cartilage rings in the front, the C-shaped cartilages with the trachealis muscle in the back. Your main bronchi also have muscle in the back. But then when we start getting into your lobar bronchi, you have complete cartilage rings. And as you go into your segmental bronchi, it's going to be complete cartilage rings. You also have smooth muscle in there. So what's going to happen though now when you move smaller and smaller into the bronchial tree is that cartilage is going to thin out and the smooth muscle is going to thin out, and you're going to go from those pseudostratified ciliated columnar cells to columnar cells to cuboidal cells. The other layers are going to be thinning out too. The cuboidal cells are going to thin out until you get down to simple squamous cells in our alveoli. And so those terminal bronchioles, if you look at them, they have just like maybe one or two smooth muscle cells around them, really no cartilage. Then our respiratory bronchioles have our simple squamous epithelium that's leading into our alveolus. That's kind of all of the anatomy of that. Then what's going to happen is you're going to have our external respiration or alveolar gas exchange, where the partial pressure of oxygen is high in alveolar air. It moves to low pressure in the blood. Partial pressure of CO2 is high in the blood and low in air. It will move to low pressure in the alveolus, and you'll breathe it off. Oxygen is going to be transported 98% bound to hemoglobin, 2% free in the blood. We'll get down to the level of the tissues and have internal respiration or tissue gas exchange, where oxygen moves from high partial pressure in the blood to low partial pressure in the tissue. CO2 moves from high partial pressure in the tissue to low partial pressure in the blood. CO2 is transported 20% bound to the globin and hemoglobin, 70% as bicarbonate ion, and about 10% free. That'll be transported back to the lungs. Your diaphragm will relax, push up, and decrease intrapulmonary volume, increasing intrapulmonary pressure so that it's greater than atmospheric pressure, and air will flow backwards out all of those structures. And that was your backwards ridiculous review. See you next time.